Angel of light, come into me. Show me what I need to see.
Welcome to the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria, an inspirational thought leader that offers transformational perspectives based on my unique experiences as a woman born without arms and legs. I feel like my life has been full of small victories that has led me to discover the greatness within. I believe that there is no summit upon which we reach our greatness. I believe it is a culmination of small victories achieved moment by moment when we turn toward the inward battle where we get to choose despair or hope, misery or miracles, defeat or victory. My goal is to awaken your potential, your purpose, and your power so that you can discover the greatness that lives within you. Think of this podcast as your weekly portion of tools, stories, and teachings that help you reflect on the small victories in your life. Thanks for tuning in, and let's begin. Thank you for joining another episode of the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria. No matter where you start or what you've been through, inside us lies the power to turn things around. Today on this episode, author and speaker Daryl Dittmer shares how he transformed a troubled youth and battle with addiction into a life purpose. Through mentors, risk-taking, and the courage to say, I need help, he discovered a simple but life-changing truth. When you stop fighting, the fighting stops. Daryl, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Pauline. Great to be here and excited to connect and have our conversation.
Me too. I know a lot of people can get caught up in the past and they feel like their past is a projection of what their future could look like. And I love that your story defies that. And so let's jump on in and learn more about who Daryl is and what did fighting look like in your life and how did that moment come when you chose to stop?
I love this because I think it's something we don't talk about enough, maybe, is some of the battles that we have within ourselves. And fighting, to me, I grew up in a Midwestern household. My dad was a mechanic. He was a Korean War veteran, pretty tough dude, tough-minded. He wanted the best for us. And I take nothing away from my parents when I speak about them because they were wonderful human beings. And everybody's got their stuff, right? Parents didn't grow up with a handbook saying, hey, this is how you be a parent. They were just, I look at it like they were just kids, right? That grew up and all of a sudden they're parents and, okay, let's try to figure this whole thing out. So I qualify it by saying that. And so my dad was pretty tough. My mom was actually also quite tough. And my mom had a past that I think was filled with a fair amount of trauma and difficulty and that sort of thing. So that's where her toughness came from. And sometimes it maybe wasn't the healthiest thing on the planet, which we all suffer from time to time. So that was the backdrop. Us kids, there was a lot expected of us for me, and I can only speak about myself. I had an older brother and a younger sister, but it was do well in school. It was do well in sports. It was your value is what you accomplish and how well you do. And there was the nice try, all that sort of stuff, but it was a heck of a lot better if we did well in our pursuits. And fighting for me, as the way I grew up, I didn't know the battles were within me. So I'm fighting all these things outside of myself, whether it's people or rules or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, all these things that I'm trying to fight. Little did I know that the battle that was raging and the reason I was fighting all these things outside of myself was because of the battles I had going on inside myself. And that was what I needed to confront. And your question about when did I sort of change that perspective or when did that change for me? I was given a quote by a mentor of mine. He didn't mean it as a quote, but it ended up being a title of my book he said, as he watched me fight through all these things in life, he said, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And I'm like, oh, well, it's kind of, I was looking at him like a dog, sort of like, really? Is that how that works? And so that was the moment that I was introduced to it. But for the next 40 years, I've been working that out within myself and the different fights and the different things that I do to myself in many cases. But it's been the joy of my life. It really has. The fights and everything they become more subtle. They become a little easier. I've become easier on myself. I can laugh at myself. I can point at myself and like, Daryl, really, dude, you're doing this? And as opposed to, and which is part of the fight, which is chastising myself and turning on the little butt kicking machine that makes me feel bad about things and all that stuff. So I know that was a long-winded answer, Pauline, but there's a lot there, and it's been my entire life with this concept of fighting myself.
I don't think you're different from a lot of people. I know that in my life, I have a lot of challenges that I have to deal with because of circumstances. I have no arms and legs, so therefore, I'm going to naturally run into challenges that I have to confront in terms of if I need to get food or just basic survival stuff. So I often look at people and I see some of the drama that happens in their life. It looks all so self-induced.
Mm.
And I wonder why. Can you speak to that point, like of why people fight themselves?
It's interesting because I think one of the reasons the fighting continues to be perpetuated in the way it was for me is nobody ever brought it to my attention that the battles are inside of me. And I know we have battles outside of us, and there are things that everybody's got their own sort of stuff, right, in terms of their battle or their battles, and there are a lot of different sort of external battles, but the battle that rages inside of us. I mean, I was 19 when I was fortunate enough to have somebody tell me that, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. But I don't know how many other people have ever gotten that message in terms of those battles inside. And it really is when I started to recognize the battles that I was having within myself, it was simple things that we don't think about, like, oh, I get angry about something or I get upset about something, and that's okay. But then I tell myself I shouldn't, and that's the battle. And I tell myself, well, you shouldn't be angry about that. You're this guy who's living this, whatever, spiritual growth way of life. Like, how dare you get upset? Or how dare you have anger or whatever it is? And it's like, well, no, those are all things that everybody experiences, but the battle is me telling myself that I shouldn't and chastising myself for it and getting angry at myself because I got angry. So the whys are, I think, because nobody ever really gives us the instructions that we can be different and that we don't have to have those battles within ourselves. And maybe a lot of the cure for that is just recognizing that we have those battles and allowing ourselves to have some grace to live our lives as opposed to getting upset with ourselves.
So what I hear is that anytime we say I should or I shouldn't is one of those telltale signs that you're in battle or in warfare with yourself. What other telltale signs might there be for somebody? Because I can understand, like, oh, I stubbed my toe, I got upset. And now I'm upset that I'm upset. And that's the battle, not stubbing your toe and reacting in an angry way because
It hurts.
well, yeah. And very few people are probably going to stub their toe and be like, thank you.
Right.
So, what other telltale signs might there be in terms of what it could look like when you're at battle with yourself? And when you're at battle, it infers that there's an enemy. Who is the enemy?
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. I would say that the enemy is the conditioning that we've had to be, and I'm not a big like positive versus negative. I don't think we can just turn something that's difficult into something positive. I think understanding that it's difficult is fine, and that's completely okay. So I think all of these things are examples of what we can do to ourselves in terms of there's a, what's the term? Toxic positivity, sort of where we're like, oh, everything is beautiful and sunny and constantly glorious. And meanwhile, that's not what's going on in here. And that's a battle because that's one of the fights we have with ourselves. I think there's a component of this, and I think one of the most important components for me, and that's all I can speak to is my experience, but I've spoken with many people about this over the years, and I think once people's eyes kind of get open to that battle inside, they start to really dive in deeper and start to understand maybe their lives and themselves in a different way. But I have to be honest with myself, and I have to be honest with what's going on inside of me. And if I'm trying to pretend that something is different than what it is, to me that's a battle. To me that is something that I'm not giving rigorous honesty to myself. So there's a number of things. Even now when I meditate, and it's funny because as I'm meditating sometimes, and a lot of times I just chuckle at myself or a little smile comes across my face, because if there's something going on and my mind's just whipping around and I'm not able to quiet my mind and myself, and many times I am and sometimes I'm not. And just understanding that is okay. That is my meditation for this day and this time. And I can't force myself into silence. I can't force my mind into being quiet, like, oh, come on, mind, be quiet. It doesn't work that way. So there's a component of life I think that's crucial, which we always have to try to improve and to be better and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with that 100%. And most of that's internal. But we also have to allow ourselves some grace and allow life to happen and not constantly be judging, well, this is good and this is bad, and this is going to be terrible and this is going to be great. And it's all stepping stones, whether it's difficult things or easier things or whatever it is, it's all moving us in a direction. And I think that's where we allow ourselves to, in many ways, to observe life as opposed to jumping on it and trying to grab the bull by the horns and direct it in a certain way.
Yeah, arguing with reality is, I think, definitely a battle that a lot of people face. And also comparing, like you mentioned, like, I'm this evolved man who helps other people, therefore I should never be upset.
Right.
I know for me, my story, when I was able to come to a place of surrender and acceptance, then there was no arguing with reality. It was just accepting it. Therefore, there was nothing broken or to be fixed or to do in response to reality, other than, okay, this is where I get to start from here. And then from here, I can create anything.
Absolutely. And that's so well stated, Pauline. You talked earlier about the past. Like, I can have my eyes in the rearview mirror all day, but that doesn't do me any good. It's better to have my eyes in the windshield here and now. And this is where I'm starting. Every moment is where I'm starting. And so the only question is, what am I going to do as I continue to start? And am I going to move myself and my life and my sort of internal being forward and consciously do that, or am I going to keep my eye in the rearview mirror? And that's another place where we can be really hard on ourselves. You can jump into the past and it's okay as long as we don't wallow there for too long. And I think there's always nuance to this stuff, right? There aren't nevers and there aren't any always, really, because different circumstances in our life generate different ways of us dealing with things. And sometimes we have to try to look into the future and sometimes we look into the past. It's just not getting stuck in either of those two places, which I think is the important thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. You also talked about taking some risks that led to your breakthrough. What were some of those risks?
I was from a very blue collar family, and that was a great way for me to grow up. I was born in Detroit, but we moved out to the country when I was young. And so I was working on farms and did carpentry and all that sort of stuff. So I grew up in a very blue collar environment, and and this is just one example of risk, but But I was asked when I was in my early 20s, as I was doing carpentry and framing homes and that sort of thing, somebody asked me if I wanted to do sales. And I was like, no, I really don't. I don't know anything about it. It scares me to death. At that point in my life, I didn't know the difference between wholesale and resale. I could build a wall, I could build decks, I could build houses, but I didn't know the difference in all of those things. I didn't know the business end of anything, really. And so that was a big risk for me to put myself out there. And I actually ended up in sales and then got involved in business and got involved in business ownership. So I had to continue to take chances on things that I didn't want to do. I really didn't want to do them, but I knew that if I was going to move forward, I did need to do them. And there were also many things internally that I needed to reconcile. I needed to, once I got off the drugs and alcohol and got into a treatment and that sort of thing, I needed to understand, and this wasn't necessarily a risk, but it became risky for me, that I was going to start feeling, and I was going to start feeling life the way life was happening to me, as opposed to numbing it with drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. We can numb with all sorts of things. So I needed to understand that I had to face life the way life was going to come at me, and I could not anesthetize myself and turn away from life. And that was a big risk because that involved a number of things that continue to happen today. That the thing that stinks about taking risks is if you take 100, you're probably going to have to take 101 and 102 and 103, right? Because you just keep going. And there is no such thing as stagnation for me. So if I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backward. But it gets easier to take risks over time as we start to experience some successes. And certainly there's going to be failures. I've had plenty of those. But the successes can help us want to continue to build and take more risks. And there's probably nothing I would say is more important than, even if it's just dipping my toe in the water, just a little bit, like, hey, I'm going to try this. And I think that's incredibly important, to just begin.
It's how I feel about speaking. It's
Too.
like I know, right? Like on video, doing podcasts, being in conversation with amazing humans. I love that. But being on stage where all eyes are on you and you have to like spill your heart and most vulnerable parts,
Mm.
that's tough. And I know though that it makes a difference in people's lives. So I'm willing to go through the discomfort and take that risk of opening my heart to people, strangers in a room, in order for that difference to be made.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I was actually having a conversation earlier today about this very same thing. And to someone who is a speaker and has been doing it for a period of time and is now comfortable with it, but I'm like, I'm scared to death. I don't
Yeah.
want to, but that means to me that I must, because
Yeah.
that's part of the risk taking that is the fulfillment.
If someone was on the fence right now about taking a risk and they happen to be hearing this. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in things showing up when we need to hear them. Someone was listening to this about taking a risk. What would you say to them?
I would say to them, and I'm a pretty blunt guy, but I would
Mhm.
say you have to. You just have to. The fear doesn't matter. We think it matters, and I think it matters in terms of the things that I don't want to do. But the reason that I don't want to do them is not, it's not an excuse for not doing it. It's just not. Me not wanting to doesn't matter. So we must take the risks. And to the person who's listening, who's thinking about it and on the fence, you must take the risk.
It's almost part of that internal fight that we talk about, that battle.
Absolutely is. Yeah. Because I can go back and forth. I'm in the process right now of potentially bringing on like a marketing arm for myself, and I don't want to. So we got the I don't want to Daryl over here, and we got the, well, Daryl, you kind of have to Daryl over here, and they're duking it out. And the one that must do it will definitely win, but the battle is everything that goes on in between.
I think one of the biggest battles that you, and a lot of people have is this battle of you have one on one side, one that wants to keep you safe and comfortable, and on the other side who holds a vision bigger than what you know yourself to be. And so it's okay, who's going to win? And the reality of it is we choose who wins.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a great point. Because if I don't try, I've chosen not to win,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And just like you said, and if I do try, then I might win and I might not win, but ultimately I win because I got over that hurdle. And that's the real win. To me, it's not the whether it's money or accolades or whatever it is. Like all that stuff isn't necessarily the win. The win is that I was scared and I did it.
Yes, absolutely. And when you look in the mirror at the end of every day, there you are, either really proud of the risk that you took or full of regret. And I do not want to live a life of regret. Yeah.
No, we can't. We can. The discussion I heard or that I was involved with earlier today, and I think she called it the rocking chair, where you're older and you're sitting in your rocking chair and you're looking back over your life, and how do you want to feel about it? How do you want to feel when it's coming to the twilight? I want to feel like I didn't leave any stone unturned to the point where I could. I just don't want to feel like I left anything on the table.
And you know what? At the end of the day, maybe this will help anyone who's listening or watching this right now. No one's going to die. Even if you fail, no one's going to die. Maybe our ego will be injured a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, taking the risks over having regrets is going to have many more rewards than regrets.
Could not agree more. Yeah, I think that's an absolutely crucial point. The fear is not going to take us out, but the fear, it feels like it's going to take us out, and if we don't do it, then the fear did take us out.
Yeah.
If we do it, then we're allowed to say to the fear, "Get behind me. I don't need to listen, knock it off, whatever, go away." Cancel, all that sort of stuff. We're allowed to say that to the fear and then just go do it. And I've had to do that many times in my life, and I was never truly ever hurt because of it. Like you said, bruised ego every once in a while, didn't succeed many, many times, which is completely cool. But life moved forward anyway because I was taking the risks.
You have two books, When I Stop Fighting and When You Stop Fighting. It's obviously two different titles. So explain the distinction between the two.
Sure. When I Stop Fighting is my first book, and it's my memoir, and it talks about from whence I came and my upbringing and getting into drugs and alcohol and a lot of interesting, funny, all kinds of different stories. I've had a lot of people say they laughed, they cried, a whole bunch of different things throughout so that one's about my story. 75% of it is my story. A lot of the things I learned along the way has to do with addiction, drugs, and alcohol, but other things that I got sober when I was 19. So there's an entire life, 40 years beyond that, where I'm learning and learning and learning and having failures and successes and all kinds of stuff and learning all sorts of different things. And so that's really what that book is pointing to is the experiences, what did I learn, and where do I go from here? So 25% of the book is actual lessons that I sort of put down, things that I need to live by in terms of my tenets for living at this point based on the experiences I had. Book number 2, When You Stop Fighting, is really all about what you want from this lifetime. And I think we all want happiness, contentment, meaningful relationships, purpose in our lives, some financial security. There's a number of things. Peace of mind. I think we all want the same things, but what are we doing to try to get to those things? And that's really what makes the difference between whether we achieve those things in our lives and whether or not we don't. And so, am I addicted to drugs or alcohol or social media or spending all my time in activities that don't bring me toward that end? toward discovering a wonderful life where I feel good and I wake up with a smile on my face and that sort of thing. And so what does it take to get us to that? And what's stopping us from getting to that place where we really love our lives? And what does that journey look like? How does it unfold as time goes on? What are some of the things that I need to align myself with in terms of principles and honesty and perseverance and all the things that keep me moving forward as opposed to giving up? It's an inside journey, and that's what both of my books are all about. There's a lot of stories in both books, but it's about what happens inside of us as opposed to necessarily what happens outside of us.
It's interesting as you're talking, I'm like, this all sounds familiar. And it's the introduction of the Small Victories podcast that most of the battles that we will ever fight in this lifetime are going to be the ones within ourselves. And we get to choose, right? Misery or miracles, pain or purpose. Like, we get to choose all these things. And the empowering thing about it is we get to choose. It's nothing that happens to us. All of those internal battles, no matter where you are in your life, whatever circumstances you've come from, they are your choices. And I just think that is a very empowering, and it can be a very scary place for some people if they've made maybe not the bravest choices in their lives, but it's never too late to start. You started at 19. I am like 19 years old. I was just getting started on the going to parties, not ending.
Not
So
coming
this
out of
is
them. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank God for that person, for your mentor who said that to you. And thank God that you had the wisdom to hear it and apply it.
I am one of the foundations for my life is gratitude. And no matter what's going on, there's always something to be grateful for. And if there's nothing else, I have life. I have life. And I woke up this morning and it's another chance for me to move forward and to change and to grow and to potentially help someone else do the same thing. So I'm grateful for my mentor. He was my greatest mentor. I've had many others. And I learned a long time ago that I need to be teachable. And another word for teachable is humility. They're interchangeable. Can I listen to people who are wiser than me? And can I listen to people who have the life that I would love to have in here? And I'm grateful that I was able to listen.
I was at church one day and they were talking about humility, and the person giving the message asked the question, so how do you practice humility? Like, how do you become more and more humble? And he said, through gratitude. And so it's not a surprise that you just said gratitude and humility all in the same breath. So you're on the right track.
Thank you. Yes, yes. They go hand in hand because I didn't create any of this stuff. I just do the best I can with what I've been gifted, and I'm grateful for those things.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners before I let you go?
Real quick, if I can just share a quick story. I was sort of, when I got sober, got involved in the 12 steps, and that was a really helpful place for me to start my journey because it provided a framework for living my life. And anyway, we used to go to this one meeting on Friday nights. It was at a community center, and it was in a city nearby where I used to live. And there were probably a couple hundred people at this meeting, and there was this gentleman named Jimmy who at that time was about 40 years sober, and he was a little older, and he kind of walked a little hunched over, and but we used to look at this guy as like a deity. Wow, Jimmy. And he wouldn't say much, but he would walk around the tables at the meetings, and he would be the guy who went to fill up everybody's coffee. And that act of humility and service was just a wonderful thing for us to see as young people, and I was very young at that time. But one of the things he used to say, and this is what I'd like listeners to hear about this story and about Jimmy. Jimmy used to say, if you want to be successful in life, and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about all the things in here, and you want to move life forward and improve and be better, you have to learn how to stay small. And I love your Small Victories podcast, the name, because because staying small means staying open and staying humble and staying teachable and not thinking that we already know all the answers before the questions are even asked. And I think that's a crucial part and something that I've remembered now for 40 years myself, that Jimmy said a couple of times to me, and that's become one of the most meaningful things in my life to get to understand.
That's really beautiful. I feel like that's countercultural to what a lot of experts and gurus would say. And so thank you for that perspective. I love it. And being teachable. If you're listening to this right now, open yourselves up, open up your minds, your hearts, go get Daryl's books so that you can start your journey to winning the battle within. Or just stop resisting and accepting and create possibility from that place. Daryl, thank you so much for showing up with us today on the Small Victories podcast. I also want to address you, the listener. I would like you to remember that regardless of your starting point or the weight of your past, there is a path forward. And sometimes it begins with simply letting go. Daryl's journey from a troubled youth in addiction to an author and guiding voice is proof that bravery, humility, and mentors can ignite change. So today, if you're wrestling with your own battles, take a breath, stop the fight with yourself. Let your guard down, seek help, and be open to transformation. That is how healing begins and how victory is born. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Small Victories podcast. And until we meet again, be blessed.
Angel of light, come into me. Show me what I need to see.